Hello, this is a video on networking basics. I wanted to create this video so that to go over some networking basics that people should know when they're in front of their computer and they're having a problem either getting onto the network or getting online. So this will be done partly by PowerPoint presentation, partly by VirtualBox with the Windows presentation. So let's get started. First, let's start with the PowerPoint presentation. Now, I apologize if you hear a lot of noise in the background. That's my old machine. So to start off with, this is a presentation on basic computer networking. This will include basics while connected to your computer to an ISP, otherwise known as an internet service provider. Computer networking for most of us is when you have two or more computers that are connected either through a wired cable, a wireless network, or nowadays even through a fiber cable in order to communicate with each other and share resources. Resources being like printers, files, folders, even hard drives. Okay, so even when you use an internet service provider, or an ISP as we'll call it from here on out, you're connecting to a network. No matter if it's a cable company, a phone company, or a satellite company, whoever provides you with your internet services, it doesn't matter. You're still connected to a network. So first, let's go over some basic forms of computer networks. Okay, you have LANs, which is an acronym for Local Area Network. You usually see these at work or at universities, schools, or even at your house. And all of this is when you connect two or more computers to the network so that they can talk with each other, share resources such as printers, software, and folders. Next, you have what is an acronym known as MANs. And MANs are an acronym for Metropolitan Area Networks. And this is usually when you connect several LANs together, usually from one office building to another, or anything like that, one office to another. That's a LAN. There's another acronym, and that's going to be WANs. WANs is an acronym for Wide Area Network. This is usually when you connect either LANs or WAN or MANs together. As in from one city to another or one country to another. That's what a WAN is. When you're connecting, several MANs together. Then you have several others. You have WLANs, which are wireless LANs. You have PANs, which are personal area networks. You have VLANs, which are virtual local area networks. Then you have SANs, which are storage area networks, and possibly a few more. The point being is when you have two or more computers connected to each other so that they can talk to each other or share resources. Okay. Also, the different types of networks and how they communicate. We need to go over that as well. There are three basic ones that we'll go over today. One's known as peer-to-peer. Then you have business peer-to-peer. And then you have client-to-server. Now, to break it down real quickly, let's see if this, okay. To break it down real quickly, peer-to-peer is when you have, it's still when you have two or more computers, but usually when it's a peer-to-peer, it means everybody has access to the same amount or same type of resources and software and information. Nobody can block it. Nobody can, decide who's going to get to it or not unless they turn off their computer. But in the peer-to-peer, everybody has access to the same amount of information. In a business peer-to-business peer, that's usually when one or two or more companies are sharing their networks with each other. so that they can share databases and have the same amount of information or have access to the same amount of information. And a client to server, that's when you're dealing with it could be cloud services, databases, or web servers. Usually the client will be you at home, and when you use your browser to get online, you'll be going trying to go to the server. The server will decide what access you have information to, whether or not it'll let you onto its network, things like that. And if you have access to it, then it'll serve you that information, whether it's a web server, whether it's cloud services, or access to a database. Let's see. Now, for a majority of homes, businesses, and school users, they will usually have basically two networks, either or. You'll have a LAN, which is what your computer is connected to either directly or through a router, or it'll be also through a wireless network. Usually when you're getting out onto the internet, that's provided through your internet service provider or your ISP. They will give you your modem. Your modem is connected to your router, and then from there you're able to connect and get online. Usually you have your routers so that you can share your internet connection with more than one computer. All right. That's just talking about a little bit more about what I just said. Now, it's when you get online that troubleshooting that you will gonna need to go over some troubleshooting steps to make sure that everything is connected properly, and that you can get online eventually. One of the reasons why you may not be able to get online is if before you get onto either the network or onto the internet, if it is required for you to have a username and password, then you'll need to make sure that that's correct before you get onto the internet. Obviously, if your username is wrong or your password is wrong, you're not going to get onto the internet, and you'll need to talk with your administrator over how to reset and correct that information. Now, if you're having a problem getting connected to the network or getting connected to the internet, one of the first things you need to start with for troubleshooting would be your hardware. And you should start asking yourself the question, how are you connected to the network? Are you connected either wired or wirelessly through a router? Is everyone having a problem getting online, or is it just one or two people? If everyone can't get online, are the lights on the router? Are there lights on the modem? You'll want to check that first. You'll want to check for hardware issues. Usually at this point, for argument's sake, let's say that everyone is connected to the router, either wired or wirelessly, but they can't get online. Usually by power cycling the modem or power cycling the router, usually power cycling both at the same time. And the way you do that is you go behind each device, whether it's a router or a modem, you unplug the power cord from that device, okay, either at the device end or at the plug in. Leave it out for 30 seconds for both the router and the modem, and then plug them back in. Doesn't matter which one you plug in first, just go ahead and plug them back in after 30 seconds. That usually gives the router and the modem enough time to power down, release all of the information out of the buffers. Then after that happens, after 30 seconds, you plug them back in, they'll power back up, they should get new information, which will allow you to get back online. Now for the next scenario, let's say you got the same 10 people, but out of those 10 people, only 2 of them can get online. Okay, so at this time, I wouldn't consider the issue or the connection issue a problem with the physical router, because if you've got 10 people, like I say, and only 2 of them can't get online, then it's not a router issue because other people are allowed to get online. So let's start. It still could be a hardware issue with those two people that can't get online. Again, ask yourself, how are they connected to the router? Is it wired or wirelessly? If it's wired, look at the person's computer. Where it's connected in. Does it look like an RJ45? An RJ45 will be a plug that looks like a telephone plug, which is an RJ11, but it'll be a little bigger. So go to the computer, look at it, see where it's connected at. Is there lights on? Are the lights flashing? Are the lights red, yellow, what have you? Look at that and see what you have on there. That RJ45, the connection is usually connected to a cable called an Ethernet cord or Ethernet cable. Check that out first. Now, if you're connected through the Ethernet, then looking at your computer, as we said, look and see what the lights are looking like. Make sure you have lights on, okay? And where the Ethernet cord and the Ethernet RJ45 connects into the Ethernet is called the Ethernet port, okay? You'll find that on both ends, both at the user's computer and at the router or modem, whichever you happen to be connected to. Okay. If you don't see any lights, usually unseating them or unplugging them and then plugging them back in, that might work. You can try that at both ends, both at the computer end and at the router or modem end. That should allow you to get back online. If you still don't get no lights after replugging them back in, try another known good Ethernet cord. See if that if that works. If it does, then you know the problem was with your Ethernet cord. Okay. And this is just going over the same thing we just talked about. Also, if that still don't work, yeah, try switching ports on the modem. Maybe the port on the modem or the router is bad. If your modem only has one port and that's bad, then you'll probably need to replace the modem. If it's your router and you were able to plug it into another port and you were able to get back online, then you probably have a bad port on that router. I would suggest replacing the router whenever you get a chance. Now, if you've done all that and you're still not able to get online, it may be a problem with the card inside your computer. That card is known as a network interface card, okay, or NIC for short. If it's on a desktop, maybe you might need to turn off your computer, open it up, and see if you can reseat it, and then put it back together again, and then see if you can plug it back in and get back online. If you plug it in and you get a light, and it's a green light, and you're able to get online, then you're good to go. If not, it might be a bad network interface card. Either you can try and replace that or reseat it, or you could have a computer professional do it at your local store, or check them out in the yellow pages. See if you can have somebody come over there and test out your network interface card. Maybe even taking that one out and testing it with a new card. Now, if you find out that it's a bad network interface card or a bad Ethernet cord or a bad router, anything like that, you can always go to your local department store or your local computer store and buy a replacement part. Or you could go online and buy those replacement parts. Newegg is a good place to buy computer parts. So is Tiger Direct, even eBay. eBay has some real good deals on some computer parts. So if you find out that you need to replace a hardware part, try one of those following suggestions, and you should be able to get one. Alright, so going forward, let's just say that for argument's sake you checked all the ports on your router and the computer and they appear to be fine. Lights are green on both ends. Then we will need to check the configuration on your network interface card. It might not be the hardware issue with the interface card, it might be a configuration issue with the network interface card. So we'll need to check that. Now normally a good way to start checking the configuration on your network interface card is to to go through the command line interface or the CLI. Or you could go through the GUI interface, which stands for Graphic User Interface. So depending upon your operating system, for today what we're going to do is we're going to go through the command line interface. For Windows machines, this will be achieved by either going to the Start button or the Orb button and left clicking on it, and then go to the section that says Run, and then type in CMD. That's Charlie Mike Delta. Okay, and then from there you press Enter, and you should go to the, it should take you to the command line. On a Linux or Unix machine, this will include Apple, because nowadays the Apple OSs have Unix on them somewhere in their command line terminal. What you need to do is go to the command line terminal. How you do that will depend on which type of Linux or Unix operating system you have, but generally if you on your keyboard, if you press the three buttons Control Alt and T at the same time, that will bring up the terminal for you. So starting with Windows, we'll start with that one first, because the commands will be a little different between Windows and Linux. Okay, so when you press on that, when you click on that, when you go down to Start or the Orb and you click on that, and then from there you go to Run, and then you type in the CMD, it should bring up this prompt or this window right here. Okay, and then from there what you're going to want to do is type in the command ipconfig /all, then press Enter, and then from here you're going to see a lot of information pop out onto the screen. The two things that you're going to be interested in the most is where it says DHCP enabled, yes, and you'll look for your IP address, and that IP address should have a bunch of numbers on it. Okay, and your IP address. Okay, so here's what it's going to look like right here. And let's see. As you can see, as my mouse is going over it, you see the DHCP is enabled. It shows as yes. And then you show an IP address, and then there's the IP address number right there. Okay, you also have your default gateway, all this other stuff, but for now we just want to pay attention to these two things. Now some of you out there will look at DHCP enabled and it'll say no, but you'll still have an IP address. Not to worry, it just means there's basically two types of IP addresses that are assigned to users. It's either going to be a dynamic IP address or a static IP address. If it's a dynamic IP address, then you're going to see DHCP enabled as yes. And that just means that that's an IP address that you got from your internet service provider's DHCP server. If it says DHCP enabled and is no, then that means you have a static IP address. And your static IP address was assigned to you through whoever built or configured your internal LAN network. Okay? You should still show an IP address, though, even if DHCP enabled shows no. Okay? Oh. Now, on the next screen, okay, yeah, this is just talking about what happened on page 30. So, the scenario will be, what you need to do is you want to release the old IP address and then renew and try and get a new IP address. As far as I know, this only works on dynamic IP addresses. This won't work on a static IP address. But in order to do this with a dynamic IP address, what you'll need to do is do an ipconfig /release, as it shows right here. Okay, and then once you do that and press enter, everything will be zeroed out. Okay, and watch on the next page. As you can see, ipconfig /release, and everything zeroes out. Okay. Then at the next prompt, you can type in ipconfig /renew, and then you should get a new IP address. Okay. Once you get a new IP address, then you want to try and ping it to make sure that you're able to get online. Now, the only way how this wouldn't work is, like I say, if it's a static IP address, then it's probably input by an administrator or someone that has administrative and root rights. At that point, what you'll want to do is call your network team, and they will go ahead and do the process for you. Okay. So now the only difference is for a wireless. Now, with a wireless network interface card, you're still gonna have you still can go through the same thing. You know, the IP config. You can still go through all that and release and renew your IP address. The only other difference is that with the wireless network interface card, you will have a username and password to get onto the wireless network. It's required. And the reason why it's required is because if it's going through the wireless, that means that there's going to be, you might have a potential of unauthorized individuals trying to get in on your wireless networks. So, to get in through your wireless network, you're going to need to know the SSID, and that's an acronym that stands for Service Set Identifier. Okay, and that's just really what that is that's the name of your wireless LAN or your wireless network. Okay, and then once you have that, you're going to need to know your password, and your password could be one of several forms. It could be a WEP, WPA, or WPA2. You want to know the definitions of what those are? Go ahead and Google it. I won't go over that with you today. But in either case, you're going to need to know those two things: your SSID and your password. Now, if you get the right SSID, but you don't know the password, whether it's a WEP, WPA, or WPA2, then you won't be able to get online. And vice versa. If you got the password but you don't have the right SSID, you won't be able to get online. And all these things are right here: WEP, WPA, WPA2. That's how the password is encrypted. Okay. But you want to make sure that you get the right type of encryption, whether it's WEP, WPA, or WPA2, or you won't be able to get online. Alright, now, on Linux machines, in order to release and renew your IP address, you can still go to the command line interface, but the commands are going to be a little different. Even whether it's GUI or CLI. For Linux and Unix machines, the commands are going to be a little different. Okay, let's see here. In either case, troubleshooting the hardware will basically be the same no matter what type of OS you use. The principle will be the same, but the commands and the settings that you use will look a little different. Okay, so as we were saying, for Linux machines, to go ahead and get to the terminal through the CLI, there are different ways depending upon which distribution you're using. But the best one to use is going to be on your keyboard. Just do a Control Alt and T at the same time, and that should bring up your terminal. And this is what my terminal looks like here. Okay. And so now from here, what you're going to need to do is, instead of typing IP config for Windows, for Linux you would type ifconfig space -A, as it shows here. Then press enter, and this will show you all of the of your interfaces on your computer. And there you go, right there. You can see that you have the ETH0, which is usually the Ethernet one. That's the Ethernet port. Then you have LO for loopback. WLAN 0 is for your wireless adapter. For me, I happen to have this connected to the ETH0, and as you're looking at it here, the top part here, the hardware address, that's your MAC address. The INET address, as you may have guessed, is your IP address, your broadcast address, network or subnet mask, etc., etc. All you need to do is, when you open this up, if you want to make sure you can get online, you need to make sure that you have an INET address and that there is an address in there. Okay? And this is just going over what we just talked about. Now, the one thing you will not find in there is your router IP address. Let's go back to page 44. And as you can see, you do not have a router IP address in there. But for Windows and for Unix and Linux operating systems, not to worry. The way that you can find your default gateway, which is the router and the IP address of your router, is you just type in this next page here. It shows route, R-O-U-T-E, and then press enter. And then as you can see right here where it says default, that's going to be your router's IP address right there. That IP address right there, if you see one ending in 0, that's your first network IP address. It's not usable. Okay, the next one after that is going to be a 1.1 or something like that. That's your usable IP address. That's for your router. Now, as with Windows, if you can't get an IP address and a router IP address or a router IP address, you will need to release and renew your IP address, usually with a dynamic IP address. Okay, so doing this in most Linux machines from the command line will require the commands for taking your NICs offline and then bringing them back online. Okay, so here are the commands for taking them offline and bringing them online. In Linux or Unix, you can use the command ifconfig space the interface name, which in this case is ETH0, and then down. Press enter. Okay, then wait a few seconds, then bring it back up. ifconfig space interface name space up. After that happens, you should get you a new IP address. Alright, so that should bring you back up. If that does not, there are a few other commands that you can try. Okay, you can do an if down space -A. That will bring all of your interfaces down and offline. Wait a few minutes, or I'm sorry, wait a few seconds, and then to bring them back up, do an if up space -A. That should bring them back up. And as you can see on this page, it's just going over the same thing we just went over in page 50 or 50. Excuse me. Alright, now if that doesn't work, then what we can do is we can try using a third-party application known as DH Client. And all that is it's an application that helps you to get it helps you release your old IP address and get your new IP address. This does it for you as opposed to going through the commands that we went over previously. One note that you should remember, everyone should remember, the only way how these commands might not work is if you don't have root access. If you don't have root access, then you're going to need to speak to the person that has root access or administrative rights to your computer. Excuse me. Which, if it's at a school or work or university, is going to be someone that works on your networking team. But anyway, to do the command for DH client, what you need to do is, again from the terminal, and with this, you're probably going to want to, it might allow you to do it without having to have root access. If it doesn't, then you'll need to either sign in as root or admin, or use the sudo command, sudo, and then you just type in dh client space -r. That will release your IP address, and that's all you got to type in. And then what you need to do is wait a few seconds, and then type in dh client space the interface name, and then press enter. Okay, and that should bring you back online. Now the only other thing here is if it's a wireless network interface card, it may be a little different. You may have to mess around with your SSID and your WEP or WPA settings. Now you can do that for WP. I'm sorry, I said WP. You can do that for your WEP from the command line. It's going to be easy. It's gonna take a few more commands, but it's not that hard. Now, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go ahead and put in your manually put in your SSID, and from the Linux or Unix command line, you type in iwconfig space interface name space SSID space, and then in between these quotation marks right here, you want to type in the SSID name. Okay, include the double quotes, or include the quotations, the double quotes here. Then you press enter. Then if it's a WEP, you want to put that in manually as well, and the command for that will be iwconfig space interface name, which in this case will be WLAN0, because that's the wireless name that was assigned to your card. So you do an interface name space WEP, WEP space WEP key, and again you want to include the double quotes, put in the WEP key, and then just press enter, and you should be able to get online. Now, you don't really want to try this if you're using the WPA encryption, because it gets a little involved. But not to worry, for WPA encryption, all you got to do is just use the GUI. And for most modern operating systems, they all come with a GUI for your network interface card, whether it's wireless or wired. So for Unix and Linux distributions, well, at least for Linux ones anyway, the GUI will be known as a Network Manager GUI, and it's very simple to use. I'll show you that in a minute. The only other thing that you might want to do before you, if you're at a public hotspot and you don't know the name or the SSID of your SSID, you don't know the name of your wireless network, what you can do is, again, open up your terminal if you have a Linux or Unix machine, and you can type in the command iwlist space the interface name space and either scan or scanning. It depends on which distribution you use, but one of those two should work, and what it'll do is your network interface card, your wireless, will go ahead and scan through the radio waves and see which SSIDs are out there, or which ones are closest to its signal, and then it'll print it out and it'll tell you whether or not they're open or closed. So also, for testing your network connection, most modern OSs come with some type of network tools, and usually some of those tools even come with the operating system, as I just said. I know I just said the same thing over and over again, but anyway, so depending upon which operating system you have, in order to use these tools may require a root or admin rights. Okay, but these are some good tools to use and some good tools that you should have on your operating system. Now, for testing the connection directly on your computer, you can use the ping command. And the ping, all that does is, as I just said, it tests the connection, tests whether or not you're online or on the network. You will find this type of command or this type of tool on Windows, Linux, Unix, and Apple. Okay, most of them have this type of tool, and the way you run the command is very simple. You just type in ping space and then whatever host name or IP address you're trying to connect to, or trying to see if you get a connection. Usually Google works, so you just type in the command ping and then space and then either www.google.com or just google.com. The only difference is when you do this on a Windows machine, it's gonna ping 4 times and then it'll stop. But with a Linux or Unix machine, the ping will probably be continuous. I found that to be the case in my distribution, which is Ubuntu. But in order to stop it, all you got to do is just press Control plus C, not plus and C, but just hit Control C, and it will stop. And as you can see on this page, this is the command for running the ping command. It's the same whether it's Windows or Linux. Like I say, the only difference is that with Windows it pings 4 times, then it'll stop, and then with Unix it'll ping continuously until you stop it with the Control C command on your keyboard. Okay, now a tool for checking the path of that your computer takes when it gets online or goes through its network is known as Traceroute. Traceroute comes with Windows and most Linux or Unix distributions. I do find that if you do not have it or it's not working for your Linux distribution, you can download it usually from your distro's repository or database. So if you don't have it, you can usually get it. It's usually free. The command is a little different between Windows and Linux. The command for Windows is going to be traceroute space traceroute space and then the IP address or the host name. And then for Unix it's going to be, for Windows you don't have to spell it out. For Unix or Linux you spell it out, and it's going to be traceroute space IP address or host name. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through what are known as hops. A hop is going from one router to the next. So each router that it goes to is going to be known as a hop. Usually it's going to go through 30 hops and then it's going to stop. Alright, now another tool that's beneficial for you for testing out network connection is going to be known as Netstat, which is just short, I imagine, for network statistics. Now, the command for Windows is going to be netstat space -ANT. Now, there is a discrepancy. When I tried this on a Windows machine, it did not work with the T on it. It did, however, work with let me see, was it AN? Okay. For Linux, it does work with the ANT for Linux, but also for Linux, you can type in TULPN. T standing for TCP, U for UDP, L for, I believe that's logical ports, P for ports, and N for numbers. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Those are the commands for Netstat. Now there are many and lots of tools, of other good tools, networking tools out there that you can download. I suggest, in addition to the tools mentioned, that you go ahead and download at least one more tool, and that's going to be known as Nmap. Nmap is a very good networking tool. You can use it for testing and scanning your ports, finding out which ports are open. You can use it for network mapping to see who's connected to you. There are a lot of good things. You can use it for firewall testing. Nmap is a very good tool, and it stands for Network Mapper. And I suggest that as soon as possible you go ahead and get this tool and start learning how to use it, because it is a very useful tool. Now that's the end of the presentation part. What I'll do right now is I will go ahead and show you some commands that you can do that we were going over before. Let's go ahead and start with the Windows machine. Okay. Sorry for all that moving around. Now, as you can see, we're on the command prompt for our Windows machine. Now, as I said, you can run the command ipconfig /all. Press enter, and as you can see, that's going to show you all of your information that we went over earlier. Now, as a test, let's just go ahead. This is using a Ethernet card, and let's go ahead and try and release and renew it. And as I said, that's going to be very simple. Now, let me clear the screen first. Now, you just type in ipconfig / and instead of all, you want to type release, so you can release the old IP address. As you can see, it's zeroed out. Okay, and then now what we want to do is renew it. Give it a few seconds, and as you can see, it came up with an IP address. Okay, now if you want to test it, you can either test by IP address or host name. Host name would be ping space google.com. Please check. Okay, so it couldn't find the host. Okay, let's try this then. Let's try pinging by IP address. Oh, hold on a minute. I forgot what my IP address is. What is my IP address? Well, you can go back and do an ipconfig / all, and you'll see your IP address. So let's ping the IP address, and that's just going to be 10.0.2.15. Enter. As you can see, we do have a pingable IP address. Now, since this is in a virtual environment, I probably just don't have it configured so that it can go out online through the my host machine's IP NIC. But that doesn't mean that we still can't run a few other commands. We can also run the Netstat command. So if we do a Netstat -an, let's see what that gives us. Okay, now as you can see with Netstat, it shows the protocol, which is we got some TCP/IP, some UDP, and then it shows the local address. The local address is usually you, and in this case it's me. And as you can see, it has 4 numbers for the IP address, then colon, then the port number, and then the foreign address is who's ever connected to you. Okay, and then the state is what state your port is in, whether it's closed, whether it's open, or whether it's listening. Okay, so that's how you can run a few commands in Windows. Now, let's run a few commands in our Linux environment. So, to look at the same information but a little differently, hold on a minute. Make this close up where you can see. So let's type in ifconfig, not IP, but if -a, and then what I usually like to do to make sure that I get everything, I'll use the pipe command /less so that it will only show it to me page by page. Press enter. As you can see, I have an Ethernet card, a loopback card, and there's my virtual card, the VBoxNet.0, and then if I just press either next or the spacebar, that will be all of them. Okay, so let's see. we got one on our Ethernet card. So let's see, let's press Q to get out. So let's do the IF. Let's look at the ETH0 card. So that's IF config space ETZ0. As you can see, there's my IP address. Okay, so let's try and ping it. 192.168.1.18 ping, and it is pinging. As you can see, it does not stop. So what you have to do is do a Control-C, and it will stop it. Now, from here, I should be able to get out onto the internet. So let's do a ping space Google, and I'm getting a IP address. Choose Control-C to get out of that. Let's clear the screen. Okay, now next thing you want to do, let's try the Netstat. So you do a Netstat space ANT will work on this one. So as you can see, you got basically the same information. You got your protocols, you got your send and receive, you got your local address, your foreign address, and the state that the port is in. Okay, you can try another Netstat command. You can do Netstat minus TULPN. Shows you a little bit more detailed information, but it looks basically the same. Okay, in this one it included the UDP protocol as well as the TCP and TCP version 6. Excuse me. And let's see. Uh-oh, I fat fingered that one. I don't know if I downloaded Nmap on this machine, because this machine I'm just using for making videos. But let's check it and see. I do have Nmap on here. Okay, so what you want to do, if you want to test the port on your Ethernet card that's going out through your Ethernet card, what you would do is type in the Nmap command. Now, keep in mind that a lot of these network tools, they're going to require you to have network rights, or I'm sorry, admin rights or root rights. So if you don't, then you won't be able to use the tool. So we do a sudo nmap minus s large S, and then you put in your IP address 192.168.1.18. Press enter. Put in your password. And as you can see, I have no ports that are open. Okay. And so this is basically how you use do it on Linux. Let me see. Let's try one other command. Let's try the Traceroute command. Let's see, where is? Let's make sure I have it in here. Okay, let's see. Okay, I have to install it, even though it says it's in there. I don't know why, but that always happens for my distribution of Ubuntu. All right, so it's in there. Now let's go ahead and try it. Type out the whole command, traceroute, google.com, press enter. As you can see, it's going through the traceroute. There you go, you're going through your first hop. Your first hop is always going to be through your default gateway, which is your router. Okay, and then it's going to go through and keep going through, and then eventually it's going to hit 30, and then that's when it's done. Okay, and all these is, like I say, each time it goes from one router to another, that's a hop. Okay, so as you can see, after number 1, it went to number 2. Usually the stars in there means that it was firewall, and then after that it goes to another router, a 10.0, then another 10.0, and then number 5 is hun 0, and etc., etc. This is a good way of checking out whether or not you got a connection also to get out onto the internet. Anyway, that's the end of my video, and I hope you learned something today. I hope I was able to show you something today. That's the best way of troubleshooting your network connection, and being in order for you to get back online. Thank you for looking at this video, and you have a good day.